Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed Joel's music there. And we're now getting ready for our fourth session. And from where I'm sitting, I think it's going really fast. How are you finding all? Please let us know in the chat how you're finding the day so far. I'm going to head over now to Vicky Urquhart. She's the Senior Community Fundraising Officer at Mind and will tell us more about community fundraising and what you can do for your charity. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much to Charity Digital for having me today. My name is Vicky Urquhart and I am the Senior Community Fundraising Officer at Mind, the mental health charity. So today my session is going to be about, is community fundraising the future of fundraising? And spoiler alert, I think it is. So I'm really looking forward to sharing that today, and let's get started. As a very first point, I want to just say a little bit more about Mind for people that don't know. So Mind is a national mental health charity in England and Wales, and we provide lots of different types of support through information, through our helplines, through our online peer support, and we also campaign nationally for change across the board. So we also have a local mind network, which is a federated structure, and that does have an impact on the way that we do community fundraising, because our local mind organisations are independent charities who do their own fundraising for amazing projects that they're working on in their local communities. So when we talk about community fundraising at Mind, we're talking about a team based in London and in Cardiff, but just looking after supporters across the countries, doing their own thing, doing different types of fundraising rather than on the ground in kind of regional locations. Specifically with community fundraising at Mind, our team has seen some amazing change and growth since I started in 2013. So back in 2012, it was a one-person team, and I joined as the second full-time member in 2013. And fast forward 8 years, and we're now a 12-person team, and our income's also grown from just 600k to over £5 million in that time as well. So it's been an absolutely incredible time, and we've seen lots of different types of portfolio events coming and going, and we've also really grown and honed our offer to our supporters in that time. At the moment, community fundraising at Mind encompasses do your own thing. So individuals doing, could be an active event, could be an event in their community, could be an overseas event, also giving in celebrations, so particularly weddings and wedding favours, also some of our owned products. So we've got Craft and Noon, which is our big mass participation product, and also bespoke challenge events as well, and a few of other bits and pieces. So I know that community fundraising is used in different ways to mean different things at different organisations. So just for clarity, for this presentation, when I talk about community fundraising, I really mean any kind of fundraising where an individual or a group of individuals is raising money through an event or an activity for the cause that they care about. So, is community fundraising the future? It feels really strange to be here during a really uncertain year, probably the most uncertain year that lots of us have ever faced, and saying with any sense of kind of clarity what the future holds. But I do think that by looking both into the past and into the present, we can see some trends and some ideas coming through that really show how community fundraising is going to be a really important part of our portfolios going forward. So I am going to talk about 3 different areas today, and for each of those areas, I'm going to look at an example from Mind and how that's come through and what we're seeing at the moment. The first thing is going to be about tapping into the giving mood that we've seen in the recent months. Secondly, thinking about really what it means to give people options to give within their means. And finally, looking at how we can be more agile and responsive in community fundraising to ideas, trends, and really what our supporters need from us at this time. So, starting with the giving mood, I think for lots of us, it's been really strange since the coronavirus pandemic hit, um, to see how the nation and how people have responded to charities and to philanthropy. We've seen these amazing kind of outpourings of support like never before. The example that comes to mind is Captain Ton Moore and his incredible fundraising. I just can't wait to see what people say about that and the studies that will come about this moment in the future. And I think that's also really backed up this idea of people being in the mood to give by some studies that came out earlier in the year. So Edelman did a study back in May looking at trust, and they looked across the board at NGOs and government, but particularly in the UK, NGOs, public trust in NGOs was the highest it's been since 2012, which is really incredible. And honestly, if you think particularly if for some of us that worked through 2015 and some of the darker days for public perception of charities, that's a massive change and a big shift in public perception. Also thinking again about people's appetite to give, YouGov did a similar survey. They did one in January and then one in May, and that saw that for the people they surveyed, they almost twice as likely to want to make a donation to a charity, and that's not just COVID related charities, but also non-COVID related causes too, and also twice as likely to want to take part in an event for charity. And those headlines on the side as well, that was just a cursory Google search, but you can see that across the board, from Hello Magazine to The Independent, you've got journalists picking up on this idea that people want to give at this moment. There's something that's happening to us all in the pandemic that is making people want to give more. So just to cycle back from that a little bit, I think what we can, at Mind, we've got a bit of insight into this giving mood through our work on the 5 ways to wellbeing. So some of us, and some of you may have heard of the 5 ways to wellbeing through different pieces of work, but this is a large scale study that happened a few years ago, and it looked across the board at people who report higher levels of contentment, well-being, happiness, and what kind of behaviors we could see from them that might give us these pillars of behaviors that lead to better well-being. And unsurprisingly, give was one of them. So people who report a greater interest in helping others are more likely to rate themselves as happy. And I think that's really interesting in terms of what is the work behind, or the thinking behind, this giving mood that we're seeing at the moment. And I think for community fundraisers, we kind of instinctively know all this already. Certainly at Mind, one of the most amazing parts of our jobs is at the end of someone's fundraising journey with us, when you know how important that's been to them, whether that's part of their bereavement process, their grieving, whether that's part of their recovery, or whether that's really just responding to often causes that we work for, things that happen beyond our control. And in giving people the ability to give, we're able to give back some of that control to make a difference. And community fundraising really goes beyond that, I think, because it's not just about the transaction of making a donation, but the action of taking part in an event, of bringing people together for your own event, of challenging yourself and having that kind of agency when everything else we don't have a lot of control over. And particularly at this moment, as community fundraisers, by giving people the opportunity to give in a way that gives them agency and action, we also give them a chance to really build on that well-being and feel good themselves during a really tricky time. And that quote from Maya Angelou always rings true with me when I think about our jobs as fundraisers. It's that people don't remember what you say or did, but they do remember how they felt. And for our supporters at the moment, by having a community team that can give people not only those great experiences where they're going to feel good themselves, but also really using our stewardship and our communication to drive that home, we have a chance to really make people feel amazing. And that's going to be so important going forward, because these things, we don't know what's happening in the future, but we do know that this mood will continue, or that there'll always be value in that well-being piece. Something that we've seen at Mind, and the way that this has played out at Mind, is an event I look after called Crafternoon. So very early on in lockdown, we thought, right, virtual Crafternoon is where we need to be, because Crafternoon traditionally has been a community fundraising product that involves people coming to your house or coming to your workplace and taking part in a crafting event, doing, and guests make a donation. So traditional community fundraising, it's not going to work when we can't visit people's houses in the same way. So we thought we want to take it online, and we decided to make it into an event where our supporters can join us, they craft along with us, and we ask them to make a donation. So what was great is that we had really great take up for those virtual sessions at the beginning. We saw lots of people joining us. We had a few hundred people. We had an average gift of £10 per person. And we also had really great anecdotal feedback as well as what it meant to people to be able to kind of connect online at that time. However, we did see that that support dropped off quite quickly, that while we were getting the same people coming back to the sessions, they weren't necessarily donating a second time. And also, we weren't necessarily capturing their interest in the cause or giving them that experience of feeling like they were an active part of the solution or taking action, because they were just joining us for this rather than doing it themselves. So we quickly adapted and we put out a do your own thing offer instead, where we asked people to hold their own virtual craft afternoons. And by giving back that agency, we also saw a massive increase in the amount of fundraising we were able to generate from that product. So we actually raised 3 times as much, with much less resource implication as well from the DYO offer as from the sessions. And I guess another side of it is that when we were doing the sessions, we weren't capturing people's data. So all of those things that we as community fundraisers know about how we communicate with our supporters to give them that glow, that well-being feeling, we weren't doing for these people. But as soon as we started doing it, the conversion and the return became much higher. So if we wanted to think about tapping into this giving mood for the future through our community fundraising, a lot of it is about empathizing with supporters and giving them thoughtful opportunities to give, but also to feel agency and take action, and making sure that in our basic principles, we're not forgetting about the stewardship that we give and really driving home those messages about what a difference they're making so that we're tapping into that well-being feeling that they can get. I absolutely know that the giving mood, we've seen it and we don't really know what's going to happen next, because at the same time as we can see people wanting to be philanthropic at this moment, we also know that we are on the brink of potentially some really tough financial times and financial hardship for lots of our supporters. So I also want to acknowledge that another part of what community gives that can help us going forward into the future is flexibility around giving. Financial uncertainty might change the way that people give, and it almost definitely will. By looking back at the last recession, we can see a little bit about how that might happen. And CAF did a really interesting report in 2009 that they actually republished quite recently about what behaviors change during a recession in terms of giving. And one thing they saw that I thought was really interesting was that people continued to give their direct debits. They didn't cancel them, but they did reduce the amount. And I think what that indicates, or optimistically what that indicates, is that people still will want to give for all those reasons that we just talked about, but they need to be able to do so within their means. Community fundraising gives so much flexibility when it comes to giving, when it comes to activities. We give supporters a chance to do their own thing, to choose what it is that they do, to pull up on their own networks, their own skills and experiences, and design a way to give that suits them. We also aren't always asking supporters for a specific amount. We don't have to have a target. We don't have to have a specific token amount that we need in a calendar event. In community fundraising, what we can do is really be flexible to the supporters' needs and find a way to maximize their fundraising using the abilities that they have. One way that this is played out at Mind is in our small businesses, small enterprises, and sole traders. So this might not be part of everyone's community fundraising offer. It is part of ours. We actually look after pretty much everybody who wouldn't meet the threshold to become a corporate partner. But still, all of these small businesses have huge potential to give and huge desire to give and are really passionate about the causes. They tend to be individual business owners or members of small teams rather than CSR teams, rather than charity committees in larger organizations. So in many ways, they're much more similar to our community fundraisers than a business would be, a large scale business would be. So we assumed, and probably lots of other people would assume, that at the beginning of the year, as things were becoming really uncertain, our small businesses were not going to be able to continue to give to us. We weren't going to see any growth. We were going to see it drop off, definitely in Q1 and Q2 of this year. In fact, quite the opposite. So in that time in Q1, we also saw a 40% growth in participants, and we saw a 22% growth in income year on year. So what this has led us to think about is really, for those particular individuals, they were using the businesses and the sort of methods that they already have, that they're already familiar with, to do good, to tap into that giving mood, despite everything else, because there's a benefit to them, because they can pass that great well-being, warm, fuzzy feeling onto their customers and their clients. And also there's a benefit to them as individuals for the exact same reason. Um, and so it's been really interesting to see how we can hopefully respond and adapt to that change and to that growth. And one of the really great things that's come alongside this is because of an increase in digital literacy across the board. Definitely for us, we've had these tools like Zoom and Teams for all this time, but we haven't really used them in our stewardship. We've been able to amp up the support we give those people, those small businesses and sole traders, in terms of face-to-face meetings, in terms of lunch and learns, in terms of digital resources. And hopefully what we'll be able to do is turn that 40% growth in participants into a 40% growth in income as well, which could be massive for us this year, otherwise facing a tricky time. So if we're thinking about tapping into flexible giving and the idea of how community can help us in the future by doing this, I think the biggest takeaways is firstly making sure that we've got plenty of ideas for our supporters to choose from. It doesn't need to be a full range of product offers. It can just be making sure that there's different things for different people's hobbies, interests, so that when they land on your page, when they come to it, they think, oh, I've got my own small business, I've got my Etsy business, or I've got my interest in music, and I can do something. I can use that to do something for this cause that I care about. Also, just thinking about, like I was saying about our small businesses, we were completely wrong in our assumption around what they would do. So by paying attention to who is giving to you during these times and how, it's easier to tap into that and benefit from that, and also make the most of it so that we can really give this great experience to those supporters and hopefully keep them with us for longer. I suppose in the same way as we need to be flexible with the way that our supporters are giving to us or able to give to us, we also need to be really flexible to what our supporters are actually able to do. And this is something that all of us will have encountered this year, whether we work in community or events or any other part of fundraising, really, is that some things just suddenly become not accessible or not possible. And really, being agile to that change is something that is going to be so important. And I really believe that community has the ability to do that, despite being sometimes seen as a kind of more old-fashioned type of fundraising. So the reason that we're able to respond so well to supporter behaviours in community fundraising is that we're speaking to our supporters all the time. We're seeing at a ground level what they're doing and also what they're not doing for us. So whether that's activities that people are taking up, whether that's things that people have just stopped doing, whether that's things that people are suddenly able to do where they weren't before. Like, for example, if everyone's working from home, and we're seeing an increase in the amount of people doing their own challenges in their gardens and things, potentially we can put two together and say, for as long as that continues, we're going to have more people doing their own active challenges rather than taking on a challenge event that they may well have done otherwise. I want to talk a little bit about agility, but I know that it's sometimes a bit buzzwordy, and also in community, certainly within my team, we still have heaps and heaps to learn to our colleagues who are digital fundraisers, who really have this being agile and agility down. And I think what it comes back to is that national circumstances could change really quickly, and we need to be ready to change with it. But I think that it doesn't need to be a sort of expensive product development offer in order for us to be adaptable and to change within our community fundraising teams as well. One of the biggest things definitely that we've come to learn over lockdown is sometimes being able to embrace the minimum viable product over the perfect is really, really valuable. And our product offerings, they may not last year on year anymore, because year on year things are going to change so dramatically that it's not going to be possible. So waiting until we have the perfect idea and the perfect product isn't going to be working for us. One example of this from mind, actually, just a quick one, is that we are quite late to joining Facebook fundraising, but that's been an absolute boon for us this year. Um, but it was difficult because often setting things up can be really time consuming. You need to have an owner, and those things are tricky. It wasn't until we really had the urgency of this national pandemic and concern about the future that we're able to push that over the line. And I hope that some of that momentum will continue through, and that as fundraisers we'll be able to use our own drive and the knowledge and expertise that we have from knowing our supporters to do similar things across the board and can to keep pushing for those wins. Also at Mind, I think that we've been able to use agility both on a small scale and on a large scale, and that's really made a massive difference for us this year. So on a smaller scale, just being able to respond to what our supporters are doing has really benefited us. By one example was my colleague has been looking at sign up data, and what he saw was that our supporters were condensing the time between signing up to take part in an event or to do something for us and the time that their event was actually taking place. That we've seen this kind of condensing of that time period, of our time that we have to steward that person and convert them, hopefully, um, and also get any information we need to get to them out. So there was really no chance with that condensing time for us to, on average, get a welcome pack to somebody before they actually do their event. So just by noticing that and by being brave and saying, we'll do digital packs because that's what people need right now, we were able to save money on our fulfillment, to get the information to our supporters as they needed it much, much quicker, and continue to see growth across our Do Your Own offer. But equally, being agile can sometimes mean doing that product development piece. And we're really lucky at Mind to have been able to do a sprint development cycle for our Move for Mind product, which it was launched at the end of August, or the beginning of August, and it was a 30-day exercise and fundraising challenge. And it's just finished because it was for the month of September. But already at the time of recording, we're well over 80% of our fundraising and really expecting to reach that £50,000 target. And that was really from looking at, again, as simple as what our supporters are doing, what they're doing during lockdown, and what their interests are. That boom of home workouts and walking around your garden path, and really jump on that. Now we don't know if that same kind of appetite will be there next year, but we've got a product for now that we can push out and that's worked really well for us. So by kind of thinking about it in the short term, in the first term, and that we will continue to iterate and make it relevant in the future, we're able to get something out there in front of people really quickly that's ended up raising a lot of money. So tapping into that agility and adaptation, I think having the confidence to say we know our supporters as well as anyone, and we are the ones that can keep an eye on what they're doing. And that can be anecdotally, it can be through data, it can just be about taking notice. And then again, thinking about speed over perfection. Um, like we say, we don't know what's going to happen. We need to be able to adapt quickly, and we need to be able to continue to do that into the future. So as long as we're not expecting our products or our ideas or our fundraising offers to last forever, and we're having it in the back of our minds that we'll end up iterating and changing them and innovating again, we'll be able to push things out much quicker as minimum viable products rather than as a perfect product offering. So those are the 3 points I wanted to make. And just to kind of wrap things up, stepping back, community fundraising can and should play an important part in the future of fundraising. It allows us to tap into that giving mood and to give supporters a way to take action about something they care about during these unsettled times. It allows us to offer flexible fundraising options so supporters can give within their means, even during a time of financial uncertainty. And it responds to what our supporters are doing, as well as and when they're doing it, by using our close relationships and insights. None of this is groundbreaking or things that we don't know already. But now is the time to, I think, really champion community fundraising and the role that it has to play in our fundraising teams. I would really love to hear about some of your thoughts and how how this has been affecting your teams as well, and what your plans are for the future. And if anyone has any questions for me, I'd love to hear them now. And thank you so much for listening.
Hi, Vicky. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
I'd like to apologise for mispronouncing your name. It's fortunately becoming a slight theme. As someone who gets their own name mangled, you'd think I'd have an instinct not to do it, but when you can't speak to people in person, unfortunately these things happen.
It's quite all right.
Thank you. Thank you for your session. How did you find it, putting it together?
Really enjoyable, actually. I think I have always been such a strong advocate for community fundraising and have always loved it, but I think it was really an interesting kind of exercise to stop and take a step back and be like, what are the reasons that I believe in this, apart from just the fact that I can see growth and I can see, you know, money on it at the bottom of the spreadsheet. It's also about what are we really adding here. And that was just really nice for me to do and then to think about. So yeah, it's been great.
Brilliant, amazing, thank you. So we're going to head over into our questions, and we have a question from someone asking, which approach do you find works for regular giving?
For regular giving, would that be something like a direct debit or that kind of thing? I'm not sure. If you ever asked the question, could give us a thumbs up or a yes or no in the chat. But I guess thinking about, I guess for community, another thing that I think we can offer really well is the idea of something experiential that that encourages people to give again and to keep coming back because they're getting, like I said, that really warm feeling. And I
Okay.
do think that you can pull that through then into like a direct debit as
Mhm.
well, because it's always comes back to the same kind of feeling of, am I making a difference, and also what's the action I'm taking. So I think obviously my background isn't in IG exactly, but I do think some of the campaigns that have we've seen at Mind that have done really well always have that extra added action to them. So whether that's write a Christmas card to somebody you want to help, write a letter to your younger self, that kind of thing, that when that goes into your campaign, you're giving people an option to take an action as well as just the transaction side. And I think that's a really great crossover piece there. Definitely.
Amazing, thank you. Thank you for clarifying as well, Gavin.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another question from Sanjit, who asks, how did you encourage people to do their own DYOs? They struggle with getting their audience to create their own sort of communities and chats.
I think that's a really common thing. I think it's tricky to know where to start. And for us, we've always started, and yeah, to bang on about it more, with just looking at what people are doing for us already. So we have a registration, just to pull it right back to basics, we have a registration page online. So we ask people to tell us what they want to do, when they want to do it. And then from there, we'll segment them by activity. So we look at people who are doing kind of community-based activities, people who are doing active-based things. So something that isn't a calendar event, but is fitness, exercise, that kind of thing. People who are doing overseas, people who are doing music, and so on and so on. And each of those segments has come out from what we're seeing in trends. And so, and every time we can see a trend in what a few people are doing, we can start to create a kind of more of a product look to it. But it's not necessarily product, it's just a line on the website that says do a music event, because we see that people are doing music events. And I think that kind of building that up into a really wide selection of ideas has been really helpful to get more people through the door, because it's allowing us to say to people, we've got something for you. We've got something to meet your ideas, your inspiration, your kind of things that you're doing already in their communities. And I guess if you don't have those kinds of things set up to kind of see what people are doing already, a place to start would be just looking within the community at what activities are popular in your local areas, in the areas you're fundraising in. Is it, is it that there's lots of live music events? Probably not at the moment, but is it that there's a really great local sports team, that kind of thing, and start building up from there. It always coming back to that insight, really.
Amazing. Okay, thank you so much. Right, so we have another question coming through. This one's about platforms, and they ask, if you do you try to keep your digital fundraising to key platforms, or do you have a presence on all of them, the sort of the larger, the Virgin Money Givings, Just Giving? This person's charity has 0 staff and only a handful of volunteers, so each additional stream adds more time to their sort of duties, and they're wondering about the relative value of each one.
I completely understand that, and we equally have, in this kind of, we've seen this real boom of different platforms coming into the marketplace, and I think um, we have been quite selective about who and how we're working, just because of the resources that it takes. Absolutely agree. um, I think, again, the most important thing that we've done is listening to what our supporters are saying. So we have the core Virgin Money, Just Giving, and that tends to be it. But obviously, as and when we've needed to listen to our supporters who are saying, we want to use Facebook to fundraise, but we can't do it for you, the more of those messages you're getting, the more it helps you build that business case to say, this is what we need. Without, like, if it's kind of coming down to a real um when there's very little resource at all, I guess, I think again, looking at what people are asking for, but equally what's going to give you the best long-term results, because Facebook is amazing and lots of people have it already, so there's no, it sort of takes away the friction of somebody having to register, which can be really beneficial. But then on the flip side of that, you're not necessarily going to be able to capture the data from those people in order to take them on a journey beyond that as supporters for your charity. So it's weighing up those options and the kind of cost benefit, I guess, for you guys. Um, I hope that helps.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. Lots of great advice there. And it always just sort of comes back to the people and who we work with, doesn't it? Okay, and the next question, oh, this is a really interesting one. If you had to strip back your portfolio to offer one offer or activity for the future, what do you think it would be?
Ooh, that is a really good question.
Yeah.
I think just at this moment, it would have to be the do your own thing. I think taking away kind of, like, all of our product offers have been so carefully thought out and built up, and they have so much to add. But really, giving supporters a chance to choose their own thing at this point, I think, is going to be really important. And also because we don't, like I was saying in the session, we just don't know what kind of is going to be open to people at this time. And I think there's also a lot that we can do with DYO that we're not necessarily doing at the moment. I think we, certainly for myself and my team, like, we have a really great rolling stewardship journey, but we don't necessarily add in some of the little extra bits and pieces that we do for our calendar events or our product things. So, like, those moments of delight along the journey that we look to provide to people that were, where they're kind of building towards a specific date. So for DYO, I think by really honing in on what we've learned from those product journeys, we can build up that offer even more, and that's what I'd go with.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so the next one is more about sort of tools of the trade and things. And Karis asks, which tools or ideas for data capture would you suggest in terms of who's actually giving?
Mm. So for us, we're very fortunate. We have a online registration form, so we use that to capture a lot of that point of registration data, and I think that we've managed to build some of our stewardship journeys by adding more point of registration questions. So, for example, finding out when someone's signing up to take part, what their biggest motivations for doing that are. So going a little bit beyond like the where did you hear about us question and asking actually why are you here? And then that can really help us be more bespoke when we're either talking to them in one-to-one or talking to them as part of a wider stewardship journey. I think other than that, we also get a lot of data from Just Giving, if that's where people are fundraising at the moment. And that can be really useful for kind of quickly seeing what people are up to, because it's obviously updated very quickly. Those are the main tools that we use, I'd say, and then obviously pulling that data through onto our database to keep an eye on things has been really useful.
Amazing, thank you. There's so many to choose from, isn't there, that you kind of have to like specialize your
Mm.
choices. Okay, so our next question is very timely, and it's from Hetty, and they ask, how can they engage community groups that aren't able to meet at the moment, possibly due to a lack of tech, or choirs are unable to sing together rather than sort of virtual?
That's a really good question, and I think one that we're all kind of puzzling over a little bit at the moment. I think, well, the way that we've decided to go with some of our products that are kind of Christmassy based, like Crafternoon, is to definitely assume that lots of people will be doing things online. And I think the same would apply to community groups, assume that online is going to be where it is. So then it really becomes a question of how to facilitate that and to do what we can to help people feel confident and comfortable and know that they have that option. Um, I've personally found Age UK have been incredibly useful resources about for just making technology more accessible. So it doesn't necessarily have to be for an older audience, but just for anyone who's not so confident with those kinds of things. And one piece of advice that I had from someone who had previously worked there was around making sure if you're writing instructions for someone, say a community group who wants to do some fundraising, but they need to now do it virtually, if you're writing instructions about that, then make sure they're accessible not just as written, not just as a video, but you've got loads of different wide ways that people can choose to find that information. I think the other thing I'd say as well is that it's being that everybody is experiencing these kinds of changes to the way that we live at the moment. I think you've got such a good opportunity to talk to those groups again, to get in touch with them and kind of and say, look, we're all being affected by this in lots of different ways, us too, us as a charity as well, um, and empathize with what they're going through along with making that ask. I think it's kind of there's a good give get at that moment as well, and being able to offer ways to facilitate as well in that moment. Um,
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so our next questions sort of head more over towards processes. And Jodie would like to know, what's your most successful avenue for proactively acquiring your community fundraisers?
that's interesting. I think because we do quite a lot of different segmentation at Mind, we, as different sort of income stream owners, will do different things. I think for me, because to really emphasize, to really exaggerate the return on investment of the community, we always want to keep our marketing costs as low as possible. But I do think putting little bits of testing marketing behind offers, particularly on social media, because you can do these really short, sharp bursts of marketing, can be really useful. And that's been really helpful at this time as well, because say we're putting out an offer that's a non-virtual product, it's easy enough to quickly turn it off or change it if suddenly one area goes into a local lockdown, that kind of thing. So I would go for just short, sharp bursts of social media, see how people respond as a way to acquire new DYO fundraisers. And also the good thing about that is you can test, do a music event for us versus do a sporting event for us versus how about doing this thing in your community quite easily with different creatives to see where the interest is, and then you'll kind of get that idea of where you might be able to push up or pull up on your offer a little bit more.
Amazing, thank you. We've got so many interesting questions coming in. Our next one comes from Ben, who says, Groundwork is a national federation too. What are the benefits and challenges for this approach as a federation?
That is a very good question. I mean, as a federated structure, it's definitely sometimes challenging because our just making it really clear to our supporters that National Mind is one charity and the Local Mind Network are different charities as well. And I think for us, again, supporter experience is the most important thing. So being really clear as soon as we speak to somebody about where their money is going and making sure that they're kind of getting the right experience from us um, is important to kind of avoid conflict or trickiness down the line. I think one thing that we've been trying to do much more of at Mind is work more closely with the network around um, our fundraising offers. And actually, for the first time this year, some of our local Mind organisations are trialling Crafternoon, which is a National Mind product. So I think what we'll see in the future is a much greater crossover and link up between those two things, which I think can only be beneficial because for some of our supporters, I think it's so important that we can allow them to give where they want to give, so direct them to their local Mind organisation. But then also we don't want to say, well, no, you can't because you want to do a crafternoon, but it's not for you. It's like that's not a way to in like warm someone up to the organisation, whether that's their local Mind or us at National Mind. So putting the supporters at the heart of it is the most important thing, and I guess for overcoming some of those challenges, just keeping that option open for people. But yeah, no, I completely know that it's challenging sometimes because it is just about raising the awareness of the different ways that we work sooner rather than
Amazing.
later.
Excellent, thank you. It's been such an interesting session. We've covered so much amazing ground.